In chapter 15, you read about Hinduism, India's first great religion. In this chapter, you will learn about another great religion that began in India, Buddhism. Buddhism is based on the teachings of the Buddha, which means awakened one. The Buddha was a man who lived in India from about 563 to 483 BCE. Before earning the title of Buddha, he was a young prince named Siddhartha Gautama. At the age of 29, Prince Siddhartha walked away from his royal life and went in search of spiritual peace. During his journeys, he learned great truths that changed his life. By sharing these truths with others, he began the great religion of Buddhism. Buddhism was different from Hinduism in several ways. It was not based on complicated rituals and beliefs in many gods, as Hinduism was. Instead, it was a way of life based on simple teachings. Unlike ancient Hinduism, Buddhism embraced all people regardless of their caste. It taught people how to reach enlightenment, or happiness that comes from the knowledge of deep truth. Buddhists believed that once they reached enlightenment, they would no longer be reborn again and again. In this chapter, you will learn about Buddhism through legends that are told about the Buddha's life. You'll find out what Prince Siddhartha discovered and how his teachings became the basis of Buddhism. Before we get started, though, I want you to think, what is the secret to happiness? In Buddhism, they believe that reaching enlightenment, or happiness that comes from the knowledge of deep truth, is the secret to happiness. Take a moment to think about what you believe is the true secret for happiness in this life. Now that you've thought about what happiness is for you, let's find out about the story of Buddhism. First, here are some directions. For sections 16.2 through 16.6, you're going to follow these 4 directions so you can find out the story of Prince Siddhartha Gautama and how he became the Buddha, or the Enlightened One. First, you need to read each section. Look back in your textbook and read the section. Second, look at the illustration in your Chapter 16 packet for each section read. Write a summary about the important actions and individuals represented in the illustration. Make sure you use all the words under the illustration in your summary. Underline them in your summary so that they can be easy to find. You want to make sure that you look back in the sections to double check that you haven't left out any important information. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Take a moment to pause this video and read section 16.2 about Prince Siddhartha's birth. Keep in mind that when you write about this section, you are going to be using these 3 terms: King Suddhodana, Prince Siddhartha, and Brahmins. Pause the video now and read the section. Now that you have had a chance to read the section, try and write a summary next to the picture to give a caption for what is going on in this part of the story for Prince Siddhartha. Make sure you include the 3 clues or the 3 words at the bottom of the page: King Suddhodana, Prince Siddhartha, and Brahmins. Here is a sample summary that you might use to write about this section. Queen Maya had a dream about her son before she was born. King Suddhodana wanted to know what it meant, so he asked the Brahmins about it. They said Prince Siddhartha would rule the universe, but if he saw suffering, he would become a Buddha. Take a moment to write your own summary using the words at the bottom of the picture. All right, let's move on to the next section. The next section is 16.3, the Prince's Royal Life. Pause the video to read the section in your textbook called 16.3, the Prince's Royal Life. Keep in mind that you're going to use this picture as your illustration, and you must use the 4 terms under the picture: servants, palaces, amusement, and wealth. Pause the video now and read section 16.3. Now that you've read the section, take a moment to write a summary giving a caption for this picture in your notes. Here is a sample of what your summary could sound like. King Suddhodana wanted his son to be a powerful ruler, so he used his wealth to provide Siddhartha constant amusements. Servants gave the prince everything he needed. At 16, Siddhartha married, and he and his wife spent their time enjoying the prince's many palaces. Take a moment to pause the video and write your own summary to give caption for what's going on in this picture. Make sure you use the terms. All right, I think we're ready for the next section. 16.4, the prince discovers 3 forms of suffering. Keep in mind as you're reading this section that you will need to write a summary for this illustration and use the 5 terms at the bottom of the picture: ascetic, sickness, death, old age, and travel. Pause the video now and read section 16.4. Now that you have read the section, you're going to write a summary giving a caption for this illustration in your notes. Make sure you use the 5 terms: ascetic, sickness, death, old age, and travel. Here's a sample summary that you might use in your notes. After Siddhartha married, he spent more time traveling outside his palace. On his first trip, he saw old age. On his second, he saw sickness, and on his third, he saw death. On his fourth, he met an ascetic who told him one could only be free of suffering when one gave up desires, pleasures, and comforts. Take a moment to pause the video and write your own summary for this illustration in your notes. Make sure you underline the words when you use the 5 words under the picture. All right, I think we're ready for the next section. 16.5, the prince becomes an ascetic. Read the section and remember you're going to be writing a summary for this illustration using the terms under the picture: forest, bowl, bare feet, and simple clothing. Pause the video now and read section 16.5. The prince becomes an ascetic. Okay, now that you've read the section, take a moment to write a summary for the illustration that you see in your notes. Make sure you use the words forest, bowl, bare feet, and simple clothing. Here's a sample summary for this illustration. Siddhartha gave up his life of luxury and went to live in the forest as an ascetic. There he wore simple clothing, had bare feet, and carried only a bowl in order to beg. Pause the video now and write your own summary, making sure you use the terms under the picture. Don't forget to underline the words that you use in your summary. Okay, I think it's time for the final section. 16.6, the prince becomes the Buddha. Take a few moments to read section 16.6, but keep in mind that you're going to be writing a summary for this illustration, and you have to use the words the Buddha, Bodhi tree, and enlightenment. Pause the video now and read section 16.6. The prince becomes the Buddha. All right, I think you're ready. It's time to write a summary based on this illustration about how the prince becomes the Buddha. Don't forget, you need to use the terms the Buddha, Bodhi tree, and enlightenment in your summary. Here's a sample summary that you can use for report 16.6, the prince becomes the Buddha. Siddhartha decided being an ascetic would not bring enlightenment. He decided to follow the middle way instead. On his 35th birthday, sitting under the Bodhi tree, he finally achieved enlightenment through meditation. He became the Buddha, the awakened one. Take a moment to write your own summary for this illustration, making sure you use the 3 terms at the bottom of the picture and underline them in your summary. Now that you've read sections 16.2 through 16.6, let's go ahead and synthesize that information. Here's our synthesis. For each set of notes in the chapter, create a sentence summary to match each section's illustration. Notice you have this page on the back page of your packet. For each section and for each illustration, I want you to write a 1-sentence summary. It's almost like you're giving the central idea for that section about how Prince Siddhartha eventually became the Buddha. Pause the video now and take care of the synthesis. All right, good job. Look to your teacher for more information on the next part of the project.